Hi, my name is Brandy Jones. I'm the organizing director here at Secure Families Initiative. We're so excited that you are joining our Voting Ambassador program. Welcome. Here's a little bit about why I created this amazing program for our community. A story many people do not know. The military have always been front and center in ensuring equity and the right to vote. During the end of the Civil War, the Union was the first to stand up the Freedmen's Bureau, and that was ensuring that those who recently escaped enslavement were there on the spot to ensure that they were able to receive their rights for equal vote and all other rights that were protected under the Constitution. So really our community has always been on the front lines when it comes to the vote. The Voter Ambassador Program can give you the platform to initiate voting conversations and education in your own community, and we're here to support you along the way. During this orientation, you will learn more about our program and the ins and outs of military overseas voting. According to the most recent data, 47% of our military community voted. That's 27% lower than our civilian counterparts. Every time our vote is suppressed, these attacks, as they always have been, on who deserves the right to influence the decisions that impact our day to day lives. We know the right to vote has not always been granted originally to Black Americans, Indigenous women, and U.S. citizens living abroad, and non land owning men. Generations of people throughout American history have raised their voices, fought, and died to establish and preserve the right to vote for every American. After the Civil War, Black veterans were threatened, beaten, and murdered for attempting to exercise their constitutional right to vote. Native Americans who served in the armed forces at a higher rate than any demographic faced centuries of struggle before acquiring full legal protection of their vote and right as citizens. When Asian Americans were incarcerated in internment camps during World War II, they fought to preserve the tenet of citizenship, the right to vote. For many, nearly a century, Hispanic U.S. citizens faced severe brutality and access to the polls as inequitable to their neighbors. The military consists of 50% people of color, 92% of spouses are women. By us working together to improve our diverse communities' access to the polls, we are building the power to hold our representatives accountable to us and to move policy solutions that improve the safety, dignity, and quality of life for all military families. Thank you so much for being a member, and we are so happy to have you here on our team.
Hey, everybody. My name's Rebecca, and I'm on the team at SFI. John Lewis said, "A democracy cannot thrive where power remains unchecked and justice is reserved for a select few." For me, our vote is a central tool that we as Americans have to provide this check on power. And we as Americans have so many reasons that we vote. I'm thrilled to pass you along to fellow voting ambassadors and SFI staff to share their reasons why.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm a military spouse. And I vote because decisions that take place in Washington, in my state capital, in my city, they ultimately impact me and my family. I vote because I believe our democracy is strongest when everyone participates. When more voices are included and accounted for, then policies are better and can more effectively represent the people that they're intended to serve. I vote because the right to vote was hard earned. So many people came before me to ensure that my voice could be heard. So, voting for me is also about honoring that sacrifice and shaping the future for my family.
Hello, Michael here. I'm a Marine Corps veteran and a current UOCAVA voter. So I'm going to give you 8 reasons why you should vote. Let's start with reason number one. All US citizens should participate in our democracy. You really need to send your voice on issues and candidates through the ballot process and fulfill that duty as a citizen. I know this is something that's preached upon often by civics teachers and so forth, but it's absolutely true. Reason number two, in some states, not voting means that you can actually be kicked off the voter rolls, and that's often without your knowledge, if you can believe that. Reason number three, it's important to vote in all the races you're eligible for, not just those, in the presidential election year. State and local races are important too, and they determine the outcome of so many important issues, such as the eligibility requirements of voting in your state. You could say from dog catcher to United States senator, elections really do need to have full citizen participation, and that includes you. Reason number four: remember that our ancestors fought for this important civil right. So, from African Americans to women to Native Americans and so many other groups, we have a responsibility to ensure that the right to vote isn't wasted. Reason number five: if you've ever been to a foreign country, then you chances are you've probably seen that most nations do not run their elections the way that the U.S. does. From the American perspective, there are so many countries that don't have a clear and transparent process for choosing election winners. Some countries don't allow you to vote at all, and some require you to vote or you pay a fine. So U.S. citizens really are fortunate to not only have the opportunity to vote, but to participate elsewhere in the process of elections, such as if you want to be a poll worker, or a ballot counter, or an election judge, or a party official, campaign volunteers, and so many other aspects. Reason number six: we want to be a role model for underage kids and for your own kids, right? So all Americans need to set an example of what a healthy democracy looks like, and having an enthusiastic voter participation community, especially those who are overseas and those who are serving in the armed forces. Reason number seven: your vote can make a difference. If you don't believe me, do a web search on the 2017 Virginia elections, where a coin flip determined the winner because of an exact time in the ballot counts. And finally, reason number eight: there's no question the military connected community is patriotic. So from service members to veterans, military spouses, children of those on active duty, reservists, guardsmen, caregivers, survivors, literally every aspect of your life is touched upon in some way through politics. So by voting, you have your say. Vote for a candidate you agree with on where they stand when it comes to defense and veterans issues. Okay, so those are 8 issues that are right there for you. Go ahead and watch this video again of why we should vote. Absolutely important reasons. Let's not waste it.
Hi, my name is Maria Campbell, and I am a spouse to an active duty soldier. I am also a mom of 3 kids. I vote because I know my voice, our voice, matters. Not only does the officials we elect, but the policies that we vote on uh, both collectively shape the society and the communities that we get to live in, and the country that America gets to be. So I vote for that. I also vote because I am a daughter of immigrants. And so being a daughter of immigrants and also a spouse to someone who serves in the military, America really is not only a country, but it's an ideal. And it has been a long journey to get us to a point where me as a person of color and as a woman can cast a vote. And it's one that I want to make sure that we exercise to honor those who have fought for this right.
Hi, my name is Bill, and I'm an Air Force veteran from the 1980s. I vote because I want to pay it forward. In my family, there are several generations of military service, and voting is my way of honoring their memory, honoring their service, and then paying it forward to my grandkids. In our family, I have a great-grandfather who immigrated from Norway in 1882, and his oldest son, my grandfather Louis, immediately became a service member in the Army in World War I and served in France. This is Grandpa Louis. Louis had 2 sons, in addition to several daughters, my mother. But my uncles, those 2 sons, both served. Uncle Al served in World War II in France, and my Uncle Merlin served as well in the Merchant Marines. Merlin actually died in service. And then there's my dad. My dad served as a sailor in World War II. Now I have a son-in-law who served in the USS Carl Vinson. My brother served post-Vietnam era, and then I served in the Cold War era. This is an incredibly important opportunity to vote now, honor the memory of generations of family members who have served, and some made the sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice. And I am very proud to say that every time I tell a story about their lives to my grandkids and communicate the fact that I'm voting, I connect those two things. That is my way of paying it forward and honoring their memory.
Hi, I'm Sarah Strader, and I'm the executive director here at SFI. I vote because I used to work as a campaign manager. And in that experience, I learned that people who hold power, whether they're running for office or holding elected office, tend to listen most closely to the people that they know they will be accountable to at the ballot box. In other words, to regular voters. And so I vote in as many elections as I can, not because I am convinced that my one single vote will necessarily make a numeric difference in the outcome of everything on my ballot in November, but I vote because in January, whoever's in elected office, I want them to be someone who's going to listen to me when I knock on their door and say, hey, I want a more restrained foreign policy. Or, hey, I want you to do better investments in our families that are the backbone of our national security. And the best way to do that is to make sure I have a voting record that makes them accountable to me.
There are so many reasons those in our community dedicate their time to ensure more of us are able to access the ballot box. So now what? What's the role you want to play? The role that voting ambassadors play looks different for everyone, and it can really work around any amount of time you have any month, whether it's a few hours a month to 20 hours a month. It can look like hosting a voter education or registration drive in your community. It could look like using your social media to share important registration and ballot return dates. It can look like reminding those within your own network to update their address after they PCS. It can really be any role that works for you. We know that people are way more likely to vote if someone they know encourages them to do so. So, because of this, we encourage you to tap into your own network, whether it be at your duty station or online. A good first step is to set a few goals to think about what you want to achieve. And again, this is entirely up to you. Some examples are setting a goal to talk to 5 friends about what their voting plan is for the year. You could DM 40 people about ballot return deadlines as we get closer to the election, encouraging them to vote and then providing information if they have questions. You can look up for events already happening in your community. This is such an easy way to get involved and get the education out there. You can reach out to the organizers and see if you can either set up a table or greet folks as they walk in the door with information on how to register or when to return their ballot. When thinking about your goals, it's really important to think about a few things. Number one, always set a general number about the number of voters you want to reach. And again, this can range from 2 to 200. 2, think about the community that you want to reach out to, and then what would be the best way? Where are they? The best way to reach out to them. At SFI, we intend to connect with those who are new to voting or who come from communities that have been historically disenfranchised and cut out of decision making. This is the gap we really want to close. And number 3, what support would be helpful for you to meet your goals? We want to support you. We have materials from educational, for tabling, we've got swag, we've got all sorts of things to provide. So as you're building out your plan, just be aware of timing. So there are voter registration deadlines and then ballot return deadlines. So as you're developing your goals and your plan, be mindful of these. For example, you don't want to be focusing on voter registration after the deadline for voter registration is passed. And if you're focusing on nonpartisan get out the vote education, you don't really want to do this too early, or you don't want to miss the ballot return deadlines further in closer to the election. We're going to provide all these dates to you, so just be mindful of them. When encouraging voters to register, military and overseas voters can use what's called the Federal Postcard Application Form, or FPCA. This is the form that is specifically for absent uniformed service members, their families, and citizens living outside of the United States. We'll discuss this way more in way more detail during the Q&A at the end of the orientation. If you are living within the United States and are interested in registering local voters using the local or the state registration form, please reach out to a member of our team first. laws on registering voters to vote using the state registration form can change. They can change within the state, they can change within the county sometimes, they can change state to state, and some states even prevent organizational volunteers from registering voters with that state registration. And so, if you were to do this, you may unknowingly break a law. We don't want you to do that. Don't bring any laws. So, um, basically, just reach out to us beforehand and we'll make sure it's all squared away. For returning ballots, deadlines change and they are different by state. So, the great thing about being connected as a voting ambassador, is we will provide you the most up to date information for each state so that you can ensure that you're educating your community with the right information. So, just reach out to a team member or attend one of our voter ambassador virtual meetups throughout the year. Next up, we're going to share how to host voter education events either on base or in the local community.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's like to do voter registration activities on a military installation. And I'm going to be pulling primarily from my own personal experiences as well as the experience of other members we've heard from. So if you want to do something that's on the base because you want to make sure that the military families stationed closest to where you are have access to these resources, even if they don't tend to go off base very often, the good news is this is a totally doable thing to do. And I'm going to give you a few tips to make your attempts most successful. Tip number one, the best place to start is by trying to identify who is that military base's installation voting assistance officer, or IVAO. A lot of us are probably familiar with VAOs, voting assistance officers. Those are those service members embedded in their units who are voluntold to do this extra duty to be a resource about voter registration to the service members they work with. Well, there's a person on every military base, or at least they're supposed to be, who coordinates all of those VAOs. They're kind of like a go-between between the unit and then the Federal Voting Assistance Program at HQ. Anyway, this tends to be someone who is a civilian working on the base, and it tends to be something they do in addition to other duties as well. So for example, when I was stationed at Osan Air Base in Korea, my IVAO was someone who worked at the Military Family Readiness Center, MFRC, if you're in the Air Department of the Air Force. This is one of her responsibilities, and then she also did something related to benefits education. So once I connected with her, I was able to introduce myself, describe kind of what I was about, the fact that I was passionate about making sure that voter registration outreach happened, especially with an eye toward the military family member who may get less proactive outreach than, say, the service member tends to be. And I asked her what her goals were for the year, and we got to know each other over a couple different coffee dates. And after a while, we realized that we had a lot in common in terms of our shared goals, and there were a couple ways that we got to collaborate. So first, she had some goals for herself. She was a very proactive IVAO who wanted to do outreach events, and so she had these week-long tabling exercises where for a week she would table outside the commissary or the gym or the base exchange. And she would have a table, it'd be usually during lunch hour, which tended to be high foot traffic times. And then she relied on the VAOs that she coordinated to primarily be the volunteer base for her tabling events. Well, I was able to support her activities. I basically said, hey, would it be helpful to have me and then in other days, other military spouses like myself join your table so that in addition to seeing, let's say, the uniformed VAO person, people coming in and out are also going to see, someone in regular civilian clothes who might be a little more approachable, that might expand the number and type of people who decide to engage with the table and register to vote. And she said, absolutely yes. So I spearheaded a kind of volunteer recruitment effort where I got some friends who were also interested in doing this kind of stuff, and each of us took turns joining her tabling events. So the best tip here is that I had to do, relatively speaking, very little lifts in order to expand pre-existing voter outreach efforts. Now, not every IVAO is going to be that proactive or active in terms of their activities. And so the other tip I have is it is still okay to kind of do your own thing, and checking in with your IVAO first can sometimes help grease the wheels and make it go smoothly. And I'll give you another example. So I wanted to host an additional event that would happen during the evening hours because I thought if you're a working military spouse, you're probably not going to do grocery shopping at noon on a Wednesday. but I still want to make sure that there's something available for you. And in Korea, the folks that I knew there were really into plants, owning a piece of greenery at home. And so what I did is I ended up popping up an evening event that was a plant swap. So folks got to bring plant clippings and swap it. And we embedded a conversation about the importance of voting and how to register to vote within that fun event. We provided childcare, we provided snacks, and because I had connected with my installation voting assistance officer ahead of time, she was the one who booked the room for me to have at the Military Family Readiness Center. She made sure everything we had permission to do. She helped me even advertise, which was awesome. So she made the posters and the signs that got put all over base to tell people about the event. And so I got a lot of help and had that kind of permission structure embedded in my event because of that. So those are my two biggest tips, again, based on my personal experience. That said, you may not have an IVAO to build and collaborate with, or the person you connect with may not be very eager to work together. If that's the case, sucks, bummer, and I'm sorry. But we have heard of other members who have still managed to do other voter registration activities without that support. For example, I can think of someone who just decided that she wanted to set up a table outside where there was going to be a new spouse orientation. And she just got permission from the folks in that building, like, hey, if I put a table here and I had these federal postcard application forms out here, as long as I have no affiliation or anything, I'm just, here's a resource, can I do that? And she got, permission to do so. And so there are still other ways, whether you find your base's library or even just have a conversation with the person who runs your base's commissary. Chat with them ahead of time, ask if you can tag a table onto something that pre-exists. And finally, think about other social events that might be happening. Maybe there's a really active spouse club that's going to have an event that you can do a presentation at. Or maybe there's going to be a base event like around 4th of July, and having a table at the festival would add additional value. There are lots of different ways to get in. And the final tip is just this: remind people that you are not partisan. Remind people that you are not here with some political agenda. You are simply here to make sure that there are as many different touch points, reminders, support, outreach to folks to make sure they know when and how to vote.
Okay. So I'm excited that I get to talk to you today about hosting a voter educational event in your community. As military connected loved ones, we are often the heart of our community organizing, supporting, and connecting others. So, hosting a voter education event is a powerful way to strengthen those connections and really to empower your community to make sure that their voice is heard because their voice matters. So, as you're in the process of planning your community event, we do recommend that you attend an SFI huddle and or reach out to a staff member in order to get the most up-to-date information that we have on rules or regulations for your state. From time to time, the state's rules or regulations may change, and that's something that SFI is tracking. So we want to make sure that you are equipped with that information. So before hosting the event, there are a couple things to note. First, it's important to lead with connection. So as a voting ambassador representing the military community, and oftentimes as a part of that military community, you're already a trusted voice. So use that particular connection that you have to bring people together. Second, always remember to keep it nonpartisan. I know others have stated this too in their videos, but it's important to avoid politics, which is often polarizing and can be divisive at times, but instead aim to focus on that shared civic duty to vote. Voting is not only a civic duty, but it is also a symbol of community strength, patriotism, and empowerment. So focus on that and do not engage in the political back and forth. So keep that in mind. And then finally, as you're preparing this event, it's important to note to find a location that is accessible. So we recommend hosting your event in a familiar, welcoming location. We defer to your discretion on that, but some places that other members have held events are places like community centers, libraries, local parks, or outside shopping centers. In some cases, depending on the circumstances, maybe if perhaps you're out of the country and some of these venues are not accessible, We may hold the event virtually. So it really depends on your particular circumstance and the community that you're trying to reach. The other thing to note is if you're hosting an event on post, we would recommend connecting first with your voter assistance office to make sure that one, there should be a resource when it comes to resources that you have on post for voting. So I think that's a good partnership to already have. And two, if you're hosting an event on post, you want to make sure that that is also in line with what they're doing. And then oftentimes they can support and we can mutually support each other in those efforts. Okay, so when you're hosting the actual event, there's a couple of things to note on the messaging and engagement. I know we mentioned leading with connection, but even more than that, it's important to make it personal. So, what we mean by that is sharing how voting impacts real issues that matter to all of us: military, healthcare, spouse employment, education, and housing. This is really a great way for you to share how barriers like frequent PCS moves and deployments and lack of military voter resources have impacted you and your friends and um, those of us in our community who have had some challenges in casting our ballots. So it's important. This is the opportunity to really talk about those challenges and share with those in attendance why this matters to you. And so that takes me to my next point is share your why. As a voting ambassador, your personal story can move people in ways that simply numbers cannot. So emphasize why voting matters to you. And hopefully that can be a bridge for those who are in attendance to connect with you. And then it's important to create some space for conversation. It's not often that we get a group of people together to talk about voting and our civic duty as a citizen. And so creating a space for conversation is important. Invite questions, encourage others to share their own voting experiences or some lessons learned and what's worked, what hasn't worked. This is your time to shine and to direct attendees to the trustworthy resources that will help them become civically engaged. If there's a question or an issue that comes up that you don't have the answer to, that is totally okay. Let them know that you will reach out to other SFI voting ambassadors or the SFI team, and together we can help you find an answer to those questions. And finally, it's important to reinforce collective power. Remind those who are in attendance that military connected voters are a growing influential community of change agents and that every single vote is a vital contribution. That's the power of this community, and our vote matters. And we do not want to minimize that power. Okay, a couple things to note on just the presentation and the environment. Remember that to dress to impress. I think you should have received a military voter shirt. This is a great time to showcase it and to wear it. As long as you're comfortable and you look professional, there's no particular dress code for speaking at this event as a voting ambassador. And then I also wanted to touch on some of the resources that you should have received as part of your voting ambassador kit. We have sent you some graphics and various flyers that would be great to support your message of this at this event. So take that, share that, use it as visuals, and share those statistics with the group. If you need more, SFI would be happy to share that with you. And then we also provided you in that voting ambassador kit with some take-home resources. That would be the business cards and some informative resources that they can take with them as reminders. And it would be great to just have on display for your event. In general, the most important thing to note is to create a welcoming vibe. It's always grateful for people to come out and share with us and share some time with us to talk about this important part of our civic duty as voters. Okay, so a couple things to note when you're creating that welcoming vibe is you might want to have some low background music or perhaps have some light snacks to share. The goal is to create a space that is inviting and is inclusive. So be creative, make it authentically you. And I think the more that it's true to you, the more welcoming it'll be. And then with that, a couple things to avoid. One, don't use any acronyms. There are many out there, especially in this military community. But we don't need to add to that. So speak in plain language. And then we wanted to reemphasize the importance of keeping it nonpartisan. We don't want to target anyone based on party affiliation. So that means don't wear any shirts, buttons, or stickers that show a support for a particular candidate or a political message. And with that, I think one more important thing to do is, and it's happened before, don't hold a voter registration event without reliable internet. So on the logistical side of things, we want to make sure that if you're hosting an event for voter registration, that you have access to the internet so that they can complete at least the initial steps in person with you. So to wrap it up, hosting a voter education event really is about creating connection, empowering your community, and reminding the people in your community that their vote matters. Keep the event authentic, and you'll have a very powerful impact. So thank you so much. I cannot, and I know the SFI team shares in this excitement too, we cannot wait to see the events that you all create. Now, with that, I'll pass it off to Sarah and the rest of the team to discuss the top questions that we receive from voters.
All right. The very first question that anyone who does voter registration outreach should know is, how do people register to vote? And it may seem simple, but of course, for us military, it never is. The very first question you want to make sure you get a good answer to when you're helping someone figure out how to register is establishing whether they are a voter where they are currently living, a local voter, or whether they're voting somewhere else back home that's not where they're currently living. That could be their permanent home residence, right? That stays the same no matter where else in the world that they go. It could be where they normally live, but right now they're TDY, deployed, whatever. Anyway, that distinction is the most important, because depending on whether you're a local voter or whether you're a far away from home voter, that has two different ways of how you register. So let's start with those local voters. Let's say you're doing something in Texas. A lot of people, when they get stationed in Texas, make Texas their permanent home state of record. And so if that's your residency, that's where you pay state taxes on your leave and earnings statement or your W-2 form, and you're currently stationed in Texas, you are usually considered a locally established voter. If someone's a local voter, there's no special extra form for us who are military affiliated. We should register to vote using either a federal voting registration form or a state-specific voter registration form. Both of them will kind of get you to the same place. So if you're in Texas, again, you can either use the National Voter Registration Form. Again, it's kind of this broad one-size-fits-all kind of form that's out there. It's embedded on the SFI website. Or you can go on Texas's state election website and you can find whatever the online state portal is there. It might require you to print something. It might require you to grab a form down the road. Either way, the point being, you're going to want to use normal civilian voter registration forms if someone is a local voter. Now, if someone is a far away from home voter, there's this term called UOCAVA. The acronym being Uniformed and Overseas Citizen Absentee Voting Act. I know, wonky. But if you are a UOCAVA voter, it basically means that you are voting from far away, and the reason that you're not living in the place where you're voting is because the military sent you somewhere else. And the benefits that come with being a UOCAVA voter are numerous. One of them is that we all, no matter what state is our home state where we're voting back home, we all get to use the same one-stop shop form called the Federal Postcard Application, or FPCA. And this is a form that anyone who is voting far away from home can use. You fill out the fields, as many as possible. We'll get into more details later in the FAQ, and then you send it back according to your state's specific submission requirements. So again, if you're helping someone vote, you've established, hey, we're living in Louisiana, but we're voters in Alaska. Pull up that FPCA, help them fill it out. And then you're going to want to do a quick look as to, okay, Alaska's a state. Can I submit this electronically? Do I have to send this back in the mail? Each state is going to have differences there. But the form itself is something that everyone gets to use, which is really cool. So that is a quick primer on how to register to vote based on whether you're a locally established voter or based on whether you're a far away from home, aka absentee voter.
Where do I register to vote? My home of record, my state of residence, where I'm currently living? This is a common question and so specific and unique to our community. If you're confused about this, you're not alone, because this is easily the most frequently asked question that I've seen as a voting ambassador. In short, you register and vote in your state of legal residence. Now, I've seen people mix up home of record and state of legal residence, but it's really important to know the distinction because these can be very different things. Your state of legal residence is not necessarily the same as your home of record. A home of record is where you lived when you or your spouse entered the military. So, for the most part, the home of record doesn't really change. It's more of a military administrative term used to determine military entitlements, like where they're going to send your household goods when you get out of the military. For some military members, the home of record is the same as their legal residence, but I wanted to clarify that that's not always the case. So we're going to mostly be talking about state of legal residence as how you determine where to vote. Your current duty location, or wherever the military sent you, could be the same as your state of legal residence, but it's important to note that just because you live somewhere as a service member, family member, that doesn't make it your state of legal residence. So really, to reiterate, it's all about your state of legal residence, your state of residency. It's where you call home, even if the military moves you somewhere else. And one easy way that you can typically determine residency for voting is to think about where you file your state income taxes. Exciting, right? So next we'll talk about state of legal residence. What is my state of legal residence? As we've established, state of legal residence is what you need to know to determine where you vote. And here's one cool thing about the military. To some degree, you kind of can choose what your residency is. So some military members and family members will keep the same state of residency during their entire military career, no matter how many places you PCS. Others may choose to re-register to vote and reestablish residency in every local community that they live in. Or maybe you'll make a change once when you PCS somewhere, you decide to make that your state of legal residence, you decide to vote there, and then you keep that residency from then on. It can be any combination of, or any variation of these three, and it's all very personal to you. More often than not, families make the decision about residency based off of economic factors. So, as we established in the last video, your state of legal residence is used for state income tax purposes. So I've known people who've PCS to a state with no state income tax and make that their state of residency because it's economically favorable for their family, or that's where they want to send their kids to university. So by being a resident, they can qualify for in-state tuition. But there are other reasons someone might determine their residency. They may want to maintain ties to their home state, or they love where they just PCS'd and want to put roots down in that community because they intend to return there after the military, and want to have a say in those local elections now that are shaping the future of that community. As you can see, it's all very personal and a little nuanced, so I thought it was helpful to think through, the different ways that, or different reasons why you might have determined your state of legal residency. There are a few important things to consider as well. You can only have one legal voting residence at a time. Your state of legal residence is not automatically changed when you're assigned to a new duty station. So, again, for military families, where you live is not necessarily where you are a resident. Um, and when you're changing a new legal residence, it might be prudent to consult with a legal office or tax professional because, as we discussed, there might be other factors to consider, like tax implications. Another note, typically, you need to physically live somewhere in order to establish residency there. So, once you change your residency, you can't revert back to a previous residence without reestablishing a new physical presence according to the residency laws of that state. So, if I were to move to Alaska, we established residency there. Then we moved to North Carolina, established residency there. I can't then become an Alaska resident again unless we're moved back to Alaska or have physically lived in Alaska. There are some pretty cool features of this Military Spouse Residency Relief Act, which gives military spouses a little bit more flexibility and the right to choose the same residency as their service member, even if the spouse has never lived there. So, again, for an example, my friend is from Virginia. She met her husband when he was stationed in Virginia. Now they're PCSing to North Carolina. She has the option to keep her Virginia residency, establish new residency in North Carolina, or retain her service member's residency. So he's from Texas, and that's where he's a resident. And for their family, they decided it was easier to think about only one state for tax purposes, and she opted to retain her husband's residency. So since he's a resident in Texas, and even though she's never lived there, this act makes it possible for her now to become a Texas resident, and that's where she votes. As you can see, residency and determining where you vote is all very exciting, and it can be complex. So Secure Families Initiative voting ambassadors are definitely here to help you try to answer some of these questions and figure out where you are eligible to vote.
So the question is, what happens if I don't receive my absentee ballot in time for an upcoming election? The good news is there is a Plan B, and that Plan B is something called the Federal Write-In Absentee Ballot, or FWAB, the FWAB as it's called. And it is available on fvap.gov, fvap.gov. And if you search for it on that website, you can find a PDF file and instructions on how to complete it. So that's the short answer. There are some nuances to it, so let me maybe explain a couple of those. By law, the ballot should be mailed to you or submitted to you 45 days prior to an election date. So if it's electronic, that's easy. You get it through email or some other electronic means, and off you go. But there are many states who still send it by paper, and if it doesn't arrive in time, and this is where it becomes a little bit of a judgment call, how long do you wait? And that's really up to the individual. Do you wait? How long do you wait to fill out the FWAB? Again, a couple of details here. If you decide to be aggressive and send in it's a backup ballot, the FWAB, let's say in the 30 to 45 day range, and then later you receive your absentee ballot and you complete that and then send in your absentee ballot, local election officials are trained to use your absentee ballot, and that will supersede the FWAB. So you're not doing anything wrong. It's not illegal. It's acceptable to do that, and election officials are trained to handle those situations. I hope that helps. Take care, everybody.
So how do you know what's going to be on your ballot for the election that's coming up? So this is not going to be the same answer for everybody. Let me tell you what I do. Let me give you an example. I like to confirm it with a few different resources. So for example, I vote in Rock Island County, Illinois. So the first thing I do is I check out the website for my local election office, Rock Island County. I look at that website and see if there's some sort of link which specifically states, what's going to be on your ballot. Once I have that information, or if it's not there, then I look at other websites like ballotpedia.org and vote.org. And there's buttons on some of these other terrific nonprofit websites that say something along the lines of click here to see a sample ballot from your district, or click here to input your address and you can see what's going to be on your ballot in terms of candidates and proposition questions, and shall you retain this individual as judge and so forth. So the reason why I confirmed that from a few different resources is just in case there's a website error on like the state board of elections website or my local election office. If there's a website error, like the wrong date or incorrect information on how a ballot is returned or something like that, then I can check with these other websites to see if they're telling you the exact same thing or something different. And if it's something different, then I need to call my local election office and get clarification from an employee. So there's a few different ways, to get your ballot information, but that's what I recommend first is always check with your county or your parish office, wherever it is that you vote. That's your local election office of that immediate jurisdiction, and they should have information on the website on that. Now, if you're overseas or in the military, chances are you may or may not get like a packet in the mail, in snail mail, which will be like a guide, which will tell you what will be on your ballot. But if you don't get that, it's up to you as the voter to find that information so you know what you're voting for, you know what to expect when the ballot does arrive.
And our final FAQ. If I'm a military spouse, don't I have to be apolitical and nonpartisan? There's a couple answers to this, but the short answer is no, you don't. I'm a military spouse. There's no dotted line that I have signed saying I am an employee of the DoD and therefore I am under the jurisdiction of all of the rules and regulations we typically think of about trying to keep the military an apolitical entity, right? Those apply to the service member that I love, but they don't apply to me because I am my own separate person, not employed by the DoD. That said, of course, I still want to be careful that I don't do something that might blur the lines between me and my service member. So if I have a joint Facebook account or joint email or something, I'm not going to do anything through those accounts that would be considered a political activity that could get him in trouble. But in general, point being, military spouses are separate entities who are not governed by the same regulations as service members. And I know of military spouses who are very outspoken on their social media, who even work for political parties and have even run for office themselves. So it isn't to say that the risks, the kind of social risks, are all the same for all of us. They absolutely are not. And I am not tone deaf to those differences. But just to say, officially speaking, that's the way the rules are. And my final note to this is this: if you encounter someone who is concerned about being apolitical and goes so far as to say, therefore, I don't want to be a voter, I think that that's a really tough conversation to have. But remind folks that voting is something that is not prohibited by any regulations for anyone, even the service member, because it is a private act where you get to have a political opinion in a way that does not erode. It is not considered to be eroding the apoliticization of the military as an institution. So anyway, I really hope if folks are asking this question and they're asking it in the context of voting, hopefully we can all agree that voting is that lowest common denominator civic participation activity that all of us who are eligible should be strongly encouraged to do in a way that does not otherwise jeopardize other principles. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but hopefully that can alleviate some angst if it exists.
Okay, you've made it to the end. Thank you for sticking with us to the end on these training videos. We hope you found them helpful. In closing, I'd like to say that serving as a voting ambassador these past few years has meant so much to me. It has given me a way to practice my civic duty no matter what duty station we have been assigned to. So with that, you've done the training, you have the voting ambassador kit, and you have the SFI team here to support you and to root you on. You are now ready to connect and empower your community as a voting ambassador. Let's get to it.